Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video. And with this one, we've got another 9.1.5 PTR update, and this one is going to include talent and conduit changes. So these are going to be affecting the power level of your class or specialization moving into patch 9.1.5, and they're going to have a pretty big impact. Now, there have been update after update after update, but this is the first one that includes more class-specific changes, and it seems like I don't know what's going on. If they've got their Santa hats on right now, but they seem to be gifting pretty much everything that the community has been asking for some time. So patch 9.1.5 is starting to look like a pretty good patch overall for Shadowlands, and I mean, I think we all knew that it needed it. So here now for 9.1.5, just some little updates for classes. A lot more cooldowns now are going to reset between raid encounters, so you don't have to spend as much downtime, and they're removing the AoE cap. So now if you want to just blast things down, it will be doing reduced damage past a certain point, but the overall cap is now removed, so you can at least try to be pulling more things, and this is going to help out for lower level dungeon farming if you're farming transmogs or mounts. But this is definitely a main point of contention. It's one that I've seen a lot of people, they didn't think it was actually going to happen, at least not for Shadowlands, but it does look like it is. I would recommend that you stay up to date with what spells are specifically going to be removed from the AoE cap, just to make sure that all of them get hit, because it would really suck if you were one of the abilities on your class ended up getting missed. But all of these abilities, as I scroll through them, are now going to be having no AoE caps. They're going to be doing maximum damage regardless of how many targets you're hitting. Curious to see how this plays out in PvP, because there are some circumstances where you're attacking targets that are stacked or have pets next to them, and maybe their abilities were being reduced in PvP. It would be unlikely to be that case now. Now moving down more specifically at the class specific changes, these are kind of the big updates, and it seems like there was a lot of focus put onto conduits and covenants, and to be fair, I think that they've been doing a much better job with some classes, like warrior in particular, in terms of their ability to pick a different covenant and have all of them feel awesome, unique, and powerful in some sense. I really think that they've hit the mark when it comes to warrior covenants in particular, but there's a lot of other classes that are not even close to that point. So with 9.1.5, it looks like they're going to be trying to at least get a lot of those classes up to par, and with some of these balance changes, make them more competitive in more environments. So for Death Knight, your Shackle the Unworthy Kyrian ability, damage reduced by 10%, but now has a 100% chance to spread to nearby enemies when triggered, up from 50. This is likely to try and help you out in AoE situations. I can only imagine as a Death Knight in PvE that competing with the Night Fae in terms of area of effect damage, or the Venthyr in terms of area of effect damage, is going to be pretty tough. This is I would assume in an attempt to help you out in that regard. Not sure if it's going to really change you in PvP. I really doubt it. Having the ability to just reposition multiple players in PvP as the Necrolord Covenant means that some of these changes would have to be completely out of this world. And a lot of the Covenant abilities that Death Knight have don't actually have any utility tied with them. So having the Necrolord one deal damage and have utility tied to it makes it difficult for the other ones to really have an opportunity to compete. But for Night Fae Death Knights, Withering Ground, which is a Night Fae conduit effect, is increased by 50%. So again, trying to buff your main Covenant ability by 50%. Not sure if it's going to be enough. Impenetrable Gloom, the Venthyr conduit, damage effect increased by 50%. Again, just flat buffs, trying to get them closer. And there were a lot of these flat changes, which makes me kind of feel like it wasn't really hitting the mark as far as balance was concerned up to this point. But will this be enough to change your covenant, specifically for Death Knight? It's really tough. A lot of them are very similar to each other. Night Fae just being AoE damage plus strength, and then Venthyr just being a little bit of extra dodge and damage. It's pretty tough for them to compete with each other. Blood specifically is getting their debilitating malady conduit effect increased by 600%. And I think this is an attempt to try and make Blood Death Knight more competitive. I've tried to keep up to pace with Mythic Plus in terms of competitive viability, and it's, to my understanding, Guardian Druid is in a phenomenal place at the moment. I can only imagine Vengeance Demon Hunter is probably still pretty close behind them, but this is a massive buff. 600%. So you may be wanting to check out this on Blood Death Knight. Now for Demon Hunter, Sinful Brand, the Venthyr ability, cooldown has been reduced to 45 seconds. It used to be 1 minute. So just trying to get you access to more of that dot effect. In PvP, it's tough to compete with the Hunt's massive burst damage, and especially because this effect can be dispelled in PvP. Although it's not a major priority to remove it, I would just say that generally hard-hitting attacks that can one-hit KO a player are going to be more valuable than pesky little damage over time effect. And I mean, I'm sure Affliction Warlocks can speak for that in PvP, of how valuable damage over time is comparatively to just removing a player from existence in 1 second. So I think it's unlikely to change there. This will just provide you a little bit more single target damage outside of using Metamorphosis to apply Sinful Brand in AoE. Now for Kyrian, your Blind Faith, this is the legendary that's come out for Kyrian Demon Hunters. I'm trying to think if I've seen a Kyrian Demon Hunter that wasn't tanking. It's now going to grant 1% versatility instead of 1% mastery, and 10 fury when a lesser soul fragment is consumed while Blind Faith is active. Curious to see how this plays out. I've literally never seen a Kyrian Demon Hunter, and again, trading the Night Fae mobility, trading the Hunt massive damage, and I mean, it's just the Hunt feels so awesome that in PvP at least, I really can't see you ever dropping the Hunt. I don't even know what they would really have to do to make this ability more iconic or notable in PvP specifically, but the Hunt really holds its own at the moment and has its high value. Now for Havoc, your Dancing with Fate conduit damage effect is increased by 650%. So this is the final tick of damage on your Blade Dance. That's a pretty big damage buff to the end of your Blade Dance. That's going to be really nice burst AoE in PvE and just burst damage in PvP specifically. So Havoc Demon Hunter, you're probably pretty excited about this overall. Druid, we're going to be getting new travel form appearances. So not exactly towards the balance and tuning there. They've readjusted categorization for your conduits, so now Well-Honed Instincts is going to be all specs, so we'll be able to get it when we're loot specking as other specs. That's going to be important for things like PvP, but in PvE it's also nice to have this just as an auto save. Adaptive Swarm, the Necrolord ability, jump range has been increased to 50 yards, was 25, so you're never going to have to worry about it not bouncing basically, and will now jump to a friendly target if it expires on a friendly target and there are no valid hostile targets within 50 yards. Very unlikely in PvP that this would have ever been a problem, but in PvE, maybe this is to try and make the Necrolord legendary more viable. It'll keep spreading to allies when you're moving in between poles and maybe splitting, and you get a bunch of them going or something ridiculous. Not really sure, but it just guarantees it's always going to bounce. For hunters, you're getting a bunch of new pets possibly to tamed, and you're getting an insane buff, at least in PvP. I can't really speak to PvE on this one, especially this is most notably for BM hunters in PvP. Flayed Shot, Venthyr ability, now deals an additional hit of damage when cast, and this damage has a 15% chance, increase with the Empowered Release Conduit, to reset the cooldown of Kill Shot. And this is already kind of the go-to for BM hunters, so you're getting even stronger. And then I know I don't know when this patch is coming out specifically. I'm curious to see when it comes out. Because the PTR, this is such a massive PTR, it makes me think it's probably not going to be for a little while. But BM Hunter stonks are still rising. Mage, this is where we start getting into covenants, where it's like, I don't really have any notable things to say about the covenants for Mage other than the Night Fae one to give you cooldown reduction to your important cooldowns that allow you to do basically all of your relevant damage, be it in PvE on Combust or PvP on Combust. Now they're going to try to let you go off a little bit into Necrolord Mage territory. Gift of the Lich, which is the Necrolord conduit effect, increased by 100%, and this increases the duration of it, so you turn into a big baddie skeleton and you just start blasting people. It's going to last a little bit longer. I don't know. Again, in PvE, maybe if it lasted long enough, you would get this insane AoE pull out of it, removing AoE cap, maybe somewhere in PvE. In PvP, having Ice Form on the Honor talent be reduced by the Night Fae covenants is still incredibly valuable. This is a little, I don't know. But if you want to be a big bad Lich, maybe. But the Necrolord conduit, at least for Mage, for my own personal attestment, has never really been too attractive. And I've literally I've never seen somebody do it. It's the one that probably needs a lot of love and attention, although maybe we don't want any more fleshcrafts in PvP, so maybe we just leave it alone. Monk, Way of the Fae, which is the Night Fae conduit effect, is now increased by 100%. So again, looking at the covenants that I can imagine are just having the lowest participation in the game as a whole, and just dramatically shoving a bunch of damage into them to try and make them a bit more viable. And I can only imagine how many monks have switched over to Bone Dust Brew and getting all the benefits of the Necrolord in terms of tankiness and durability. But now Way of the Fae might be a bit more viable, dealing extra damage and having an extra chance to trigger. Might make it more competitive, maybe more so in PvE, but in PvP as well, potentially. If you get a bunch of these Fey lines on the ground, you might be able to disrupt a lot, but it seems like a kind of boring way, maybe. I mean, at the same time, these spells were just not effective if they needed 100% buff. So again, maybe we'll just go from here. Now for Paladin, Necrolord Paladin specifically, Righteous Might, Necrolord Conduit damage effect increased by 400%, and the healing effect reduced by 50%. So instead of dealing damage and healing you, it's just going to be doing a massive amount of damage. Your Covenant ability, 400%. Again, I can't remember the last time I saw a Necrolord Paladin in as any spec in any content, really. And I mean, it just doesn't stand out as much of a punch as the rest of them, right? Like with Kyrian as Divine Toll, sending out a bunch of judgments or holy shocks, or as Venthyr with the massive Ashen Hollow on the ground, or even as Night Fae with the unique because of its blessings and the way they interact with other classes and how you're trying to synergize them when the seasons are changing. They all have their kind of unique or just massive effect and feel. The Necrolord one was already like always just like, oh, an extra little hammer that I hit. It was like a rotational ability that just didn't really feel as impactful. It kind of overlapped with already existing identity spells on the Paladin action bar, where it was like basically it's just Templar's Verdict. It just feels like the same button. Didn't have that big pop. Well, maybe now it's going to have a big pop. We're going to have to still wait and see. But it's, again, these are the covenants that are the least played, getting massive buffs, so you may want to look at them. And especially now that you're going to be able to switch your covenant around more freely later on, I think once we get up to maximum renown, you may actually want to go over and try some of these out, or maybe they'll keep buffing them, right? Because if they remain unplayed, I would imagine that they're just going to keep buffing them. Blessing of Seasons for the Night Fae Paladins. Blessing of Springs now increases the healing done by 15%, buff by 5, and the healing received by 30, up from 20. So 30% healing received and done. Blessing of Winter now reduces the hostile target's attack speed and movement speed by 5% per stack, down or up from 3, and its damage has been increased by 40%. So trying to alleviate all of the benefits from the Blessing of Summer, which was just damage increase, and now make some of the utility and the extra healing from the other blessings more viable. Again, Divine Toll is really tough to compete with in PvP. Ashen Hollow is really tough to compete with in PvE or PvP in some cases. I don't know if you're going to want to trade off the ability to just immediately erase someone in PvP for this extra kind of utility-based play. I have seen some cheesy prop Paladin immunity boomkin convoke one-shot Blessing of Summer stuff on YouTube. So there's that, but other than that, I don't know if this is going to be enough for it, at least to get my attention going for it. It's not really drawing me into it. Now, Priest, at least a lot of PvP priests, maybe PvE priests out there want to talk to this a bit as well for me, but Festering Transfusion, which is the Necrolord Conduit, its damage and healing effect is increased by 100%. So your transfusion is just going to do more damage and heal more. A lot of priests already in PvP were going Necrolord, so you're just straight up getting stronger. Much like the BM Hunter, this is going to be a really significant change for you. And then for the other specializations, they're buffing Divine Star by 40%. It's on a really tough row of talents to compete with, so 40%, maybe it's not enough. Same thing with Contrition Healing and Shadow Covenant buffs. They're competing with just a static talent at the moment that is just a flat out, just a massive amount of throughput. In PvE, these may have implications, but in PvP, I can't imagine that these talents are going to be changing too much for you. It's only 15% increased healing for the Contrition talent, and Shadow Covenant's healing is increased by 10% and reduced by 10% mana, and the duration is lowered to 7 seconds, down from 9. Shadow Covenant in PvP, at least for me, has I've never been drawn into trying it too much. It just seems a little bit wonky. to get it going in PvP, but in PvE, maybe this is something that you're going to utilize. Surrender to Madness duration is increased to 30 seconds, so this is going to be helpful to any Shadow Priests that are running the Honor talents to get access to this. You're getting 5 extra seconds on it. You're getting more damage from the Necrolord. You're feeling pretty good about that. Psychic Link talent deals 60% of Mind Blast damage, up from, and it was 50. PvP, I'm not sure if you'll want to run this for just 10% damage buff. Can't really speak to PvE about this, unfortunately. Now for Rogue, your Septic Shock, your Night Fae Conduit effect is increased by 50%. So just the damage over time effect of your Night Fae Covenant ability is just going to be getting stronger, just flat out 50% buff. Again, likely looking at the Covenants that are lesser played or less popular and just kind of buffing their damage up to try and get them to the point where people might be like, it's getting close. But if it's coming down to that, then it's always just a numbers game. Which one's doing higher? Which one's doing higher? If it's not going to be anything about unique utility, unfortunately. But maybe there's some extra stonks here. Really tough, again, to compete for rogues in PvP from the Necrolord, Bone Spike, and survivability. It feels like you really need it. Or for the Venthyr rogues that are going for the big blast. Not sure if you're going to want to give that up for this. Plus the other benefits of being Venthyr with extra versatility procs and things like that. For Shaman, this is one that I don't know. PvE Shamans, please tell me if you run this as any specialization. But I really don't think you do, right? You don't run Kyrian Shamans for anything. In PvP, you definitely don't run Kyrian Shaman for anything. Elysian Dirge, the Kyrian Conduit effect is increased by 50%. I think it's just only the damage to the nearest target from the totem. There may be some weird cheese world where, like Chuck E. Cheese or something, where this in PvP just massively erases the target that's next to the totem, but the totem can be killed, has very low HP. It's tough to aim, keep it in place for the person who's next to it to not notice it and have it not go off in PvP. So probably a still don't want to touch Covenants, unfortunately, for Shaman. And now for Warlock. Warlock is one where none of their Covenant abilities really make me feel like, wow, I'm powerful. When I see them, when I interact with them, when I looked at them, when I tried them, I was never just like, wow, this thing is amazing to press. Like, it seems like the Night Fae one, Soul Rot, at least is the most intricate one to the class, where you like send out this rot and then suck it all back with Drain Life. It's a unique interaction. I can visualize it. But for the other ones, they were either really slow, not really working properly, or not really doing anything too relevant. Outside of maybe I've seen Decimating Bolt on Demonology Warlock be really cheesy, but none of them were just like, wow, popping off to me. I really would have liked to have seen the Covenants for Warlock get looked at, and I'm not sure if these changes will be enough. Impending Catastrophe, the Venthyr ability, Chaotic Anima Cloud width has been increased by 60% and now deals a tick of its periodic damage on impact and will more accurately apply its damage over time effect to hostile targets. So just trying to make the cloud actually hit stuff and do what it's supposed to do, and get a little bit of extra damage. Still really unlikely to see it in PvP. I would think you're not going to see it. Decimating Bolt Necrolord ability cast time has been reduced by 0.5 seconds to 2 seconds. I still think 2 seconds is really long for this. Maybe it's a PvE reason that it needs to be this long, but in PvP, at least Demonology, you might be pretty stoked about this, right? To get some massive Demon Bolts out with it. But for Affliction or Destro, 2 seconds is still really long time to cast. Scouring Tithe, although in PvE as a Destro Warlock, at least from what I remember, it was a pretty interesting build with Decimating Bolt specifically, so maybe 2 second cast might be nice there. Scouring Tithe, the Kyrian ability, is instant and periodic damage is now increased by 20%, and its cast time is reduced to 1.5 seconds. It was 2, and you can see already how the Warlock Covenant abilities are all very long cast times. Whereas for all the other Covenant abilities in PvP, generally speaking, are pretty fast cast times with larger impact than these abilities. So, 1.5 seconds. I still don't think in PvP you're going to trade the mobility, the extra damage and defense provided from Night Fae for this one specifically. It's nice, but I don't know if it's going to be enough, honestly. Languishing Soul Detritus, I probably butchered that one. The Kyrian Rune Carving effect for your Scouring Tithe ability. Your critical strike chance bonus increased to 45%, was 40%, and now also grants the Warlock a 33% movement speed and a 15% critical strike chance increase when the Scouring Tithe expires. To give you a little bit of a sprint effect, but it's only after it ends. 33% is not really that big. for helping you move around the map that much, giving you a little bit of extra crit damage in a dot. And you're going to have to miss out on your Sacrilash. It's not standing out to me, honestly, for Warlock here, at least in PvP, right? I can't speak to PvE for this one too much, but for PvP, none of these ones are really standing out too much. And now for Warrior, Harrowing Punishment, the Venthyr conduit effect is increased by 50%. I feel like a lot of warriors have been shifting out of Venthyr, so I'm actually not surprised to see this. A lot of warriors in Okirian or their Necrolord. Not so much Night Fae, although Night Fae does have its place. I think it's got its kind of own unique effect in terms of its utility. Still probably the least popular one, though. But this isn't surprising to me to see Venthyr conduit changes, just because it seems like a lot of warriors have completely left it. Merciless Bone Grinder conduit effect increased by 100%. So just trying to get more damage into Arms Warrior. This is probably more specifically to PvE, but in PvP, you're definitely happy to see more damage. Hack and Slash conduit increased by 50% for Fury. Some love for Fury Warrior. You certainly needed it. Protection, Sinful Surge, Venthyr Rune Carving ability now extends the duration of Avatar by 2.5 when the Covenant Venthyr ability is cast. Was Last Stand duration extended by 3 seconds. But this is only for Prot. Although it says Prot, but I'm pretty sure other specs can wear this legendary. So you might be getting some extra Avatar uptime potentially from this, which is a little bit unfortunate because Warriors already had to make the most amount of legendaries of any class in the game that I've seen so far. So putting another one on there is going to be a bit yikes. But specifically, there's another change down here that's new, which is going to be that you can re-roll your legendary. Did I scroll past it? I must have scrolled past it, right? Did I not scroll past it? Basically, they're going to allow you to disenchant your legendary, and you're going to get your Soul Ash and your Soul Cinders back. And then it's going to be available later on the PTR build to allow you to recraft different legendaries. The only thing that I'm not the biggest fan of as far as this is concerned is that it doesn't say your gold. It doesn't say your missives. It doesn't say the slot of gear returned. It only says the Soul Ash and the Soul Cinders. So I would then assume that it's expected you're going to have to buy the new slot of gear, buy the new missives, and drop a ton of gold if you want to be able to switch your legendary around. Let's say you're done playing a spec, so you want to go to a different one, you reroll the legendary instead of waiting 5 weeks with Torghast. It's going to cost you a ton of gold. Like, you thought respecking your Azerite traits is expensive. This thing is going to be very expensive to do it. So I would not necessarily recommend doing this more than like for a massive change or a one-time change, unless they include some other features on top of it. They are scaling the PvP gear to be closer to the max level PvP gear, so there isn't as big of a gap between the highest geared players and the lesser geared players. I'm still a bit worried that it's going to kind of get you into a place where when you're at this lower item level stage, you're kind of just like the potato that's not really doing very much, but it's kind of tanky randomly and doesn't die, so it's just annoying. You're just like the potato that doesn't die, just running around trying to do what you can. And that's how BFA felt when there was this type of scaling. Although it was invisible, there was scaling similar to this. So if you're a new max level character, you were scaled to the person you were attacking, and it always just made the person getting scaled kind of just feel kind of bleh, like it didn't feel good for the person who was attacking them or the person that was getting scaled too much. So I'm a bit worried about that one, and I'm mostly worried that they're not looking at the amount of cost towards the amount of honor it takes to get through this process. I would really like to see a dramatic drop in the amount of honor required to level up your gear, rank up your gear, because right now it is just so dramatically huge, basically. But as you can see, there's going to be a lot of changes coming through. Seems like for PvP specifically, Hunter and Shadow Priest, you're going to be very stoked about the changes that are coming through. Unfortunately, for a lot of the other classes that have covenants that are underrepresented, doesn't seem like they're looking at them too specifically in terms of trying to like change their effect and make them more interesting. They're just getting flat buffs, which is then just going to be a numbers game as to whether or not which one comes out ahead of the other one. It seems like the changes are more in line with making them feel a little less bad than the worst option, which means they're probably not the best. But other than that, thank you for watching the video. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave it with a thumbs up. Comment down below with your thoughts in 9.1.5. What would you like to see on your wish list? Other than that, if you really like the video, hit the subscribe button. Absolutely free. Just lets you know when my videos go live, and I'm doing my best to keep you up to the know and the now of World of Warcraft. So every single patch and update, I review and I provide guides onto this channel as well. So if you're interested in learning how to up your game, this is going to be the place to be. Other than that, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.